Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night, depending on where you are in the world. And welcome and thank you for joining me for a lovely live stream. I'm going to be joined today by Andy Stevenson from CBR UK, where we're going to be talking about the Imago Day, or the Euthanasia Day, and the battle for the right to life, which, as those of you that are following British politics will know, has reached a new zenith with the attempt to legalise euthanasia or assisted suicide. And he's going to be here to talk to us about CBR UK, the battle for the right to life, abortion, and euthanasia. So without further ado, peace be with you, Andy.
Hi, Bob. Good to see you.
Good to see you as well. Thanks so much for joining us. Do you just before we start properly and we begin with a prayer, do you just want to just introduce yourself maybe in a better way than I could?
Well, that was fairly exhaustive, really. There's not much more to me. Father of 3 children. And just started this work very early on in my wife's first pregnancy, and it's just been growing since quite organically, and very grateful to God for the success that we've had and for opportunities like this, Bob. So thank you.
My pleasure. I always want to platform good Christian ministries. So if there are any out there that want to be platformed, or if you can think of any that you think I should platform, Andy, do let me know at the end. Let's start off, as we always do, with a prayer. So you're going to read a psalm, read it all the way through, and that'll be our opening prayer, and then we'll get into the meat and the gravy of what we're talking about.
I've got to ask, Bob, it was very tempting to do this, but I imagine it's been done many times before, suggesting Psalm 119. Would that have been
that's a super long one, right?
Yeah.
Maybe avoid that one. Like you can do if you really want to, but that'll take up the first 40 minutes of the of the live stream.
You've convinced me. Well, I thought I'm going to go for Psalm 86.
So if you just read it as a prayer, and then that'll be it.
Right. Thank you. So, incline your ear, O Lord, and answer me, for I am poor and needy. Preserve my life, for I am godly. Save your servant who trusts in you. You are my God. Be gracious to me, O Lord, for to you do I cry all the day. Gladden the soul of your servant, for to you, O Lord, do I lift up my soul. For you, O Lord, are good and forgiving, abounding in steadfast love to all who call upon you. Give ear, O Lord, to my prayer. Listen to my plea for grace. In the day of my trouble, I call upon you, for you answer me. There is none like you among the gods, O Lord, nor are there any works like yours. All the nations you have made shall come and worship before you, O Lord, and shall glorify your name. For you are great and do wondrous things. You alone are God. Teach me your way, O Lord, that I may walk in your truth. Unite my heart to fear your name. I give thanks to you, O Lord my God, with my whole heart, and I will glorify your name forever. For great is your steadfast love toward me. You have delivered my soul from the depths of Sheol. And O God, insolent men have risen up against me. A band of ruthless men seeks my life, and they do not set you before them. But you, O Lord, are a God merciful and gracious, slow to anger, and abounding in steadfast love and faithfulness. Turn to me and be gracious to me. Give your strength to your servant and save the son of your maidservant. Show me a sign of your favor, that those who hate me may see and be put to shame, because you, Lord, have helped me and comforted me. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. So, tell us a little bit about CBR UK. We've had you on before, but there's obviously going to be new people watching this since the last time I had a representative CBR UK on, an organisation that I've got a lot of respect for. So just introduce yourself, the organisation, to everybody.
Sure. Okay. Well, it may help if you don't mind if I share why CBR UK came.
Yeah.
It may explain the function of it to some degree. So I became aware of the abortion issue in around 2006 when we were expecting our first baby. I'd never thought about abortion before, never really heard about it, talked about in church, or I'd say I would probably avoid it in conversation. It wasn't something I felt comfortable discussing, just because I knew little about it. But when I saw a picture, and this was the thing that woke me up to it, started the whole process, seeing the reality of abortion. I saw a picture of a baby who'd been aborted, who gestationally was the same age as our daughter, as we'd just seen her on the screen in the local hospital for the 12-week scan. And I was unable to get that picture out of my head, and I didn't want to see anything like that again, just because it was so heartbreaking. And I thought, but there's got to be something going on to try and stop this. Why have I never heard of this? If it's so awful, why have I never heard of it? Why isn't the church speaking about it? Where is the opposition to it? Is there anything that exists to drive a spoke through this wheel of injustice? And that started me on this search within the UK to see what kind of responses were occurring in opposition to abortion. And I found some lovely people who, attitudinally, they were very much against abortion, wanted to see change, but I couldn't see anything at an organizational level that I felt I could really invest my time, my energy into, that was going to return some kind of positive feedback. I wasn't satisfied with just the suggestions that I was coming across was, well, you can write a letter to your MP, which is great. We certainly need more of that. Or you can look at the more pastoral side, helping with crisis pregnancy centres, and then again, very necessary kind of work. But there was nothing really to feel. There was a kind of the amount of energy I'd be putting in would be the kind of comparable with the results I'd be seeing. And it just dawned on me, it was seeing abortion that had kind of woken me up to this. So it just made sense that there must be other people who also haven't seen it, and would feel an equivalent kind of stirring to intervene. So I started, as you know, this was, you know, coming up to 20 years ago, 18 years ago. And what I was doing, I would go on YouTube and I would have fruitless and heated exchanges with people. And it would all be, it'd all be a lot of noise and very little clarity. But in these conversations, actually connected with a guy who worked for CBR in the States, and I've not heard of CBR. I had a look at some of their stuff, and I went on their website and saw them using these images on large formats, printing out in the public square on university campuses, and seeing the transformation of what happened to me happening elsewhere, not just, you know, here in the UK, but in other cultures. And it was one particular video of this on this, I don't remember what the university was, but there was a whole crowd of kind of baying pro-abortion students standing in opposition to the display of these abortion images. And there was this particular student who the camera focused in on for a particular reason, because he began by, you know, with some hostility towards CBR's presence there, but as he was listening to the discussions, and the CBR team were effectively using these kind of extremist pro-abortion students as foils to have a discussion to those who were listening in, you saw his mind begin to change. And so with the reality of the horror of abortion on display, and hearing the vacuous nature of those who try to defend abortion, and the convincing case for protecting unborn babies, you just saw him switch. And then he began standing on the other side of the barriers amongst the students, you know, arguing with his fellow students, saying, you know, they've got a point.
Thanks be to God.
I thought this looks like something worth spending my time looking into. So I connected with a guy in Sweden and other CBR groups all around the world, and we began discussing what that could look like over here. He came over here to help us on our first display. I mean, that the whole kind of build up to just
to jump in on these displays, for those that don't know, the displays that Andy's talking about are pictures basically of children that have been aborted. Some of them are showing children that have been chopped up. Some of them are showing, you know, you can see their little baby limbs. You can see their little fingers. You can see their little toes. You can see their little legs. There was one particular picture that I saw from CBR UK that showed a clearly fully developed human being. A little baby had been decapitated, and its legs and arms had been sliced off, and it's really impactful imagery when you see that. You know, the thought of seeing a chopped up baby is I mean, you can just imagine it, guys and girls. It's just an incredibly impactful image, and it confronts you with the horror of abortion. It's kind of, and it's taking its lead, isn't it, from the people that abolitionists who confronted the slave trading world with the horror of what slavery actually looked like.
Yeah,
you know, and am I right in understanding that is the primary tactic of CBR UK, is to confront people with the horror of abortion?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I would say at a strategic level, as opposed to sort of tactical level. But thanks for picking up on that, Bob, because that was the very thing. I mentioned that I found it really difficult to look at those pictures again, and I resisted doing it until I saw the reactions, the impact that it would have, how it would, kind of wake people up to this horror. But then it was the study of the history of social reform, and that sense of hope that society can change, that it was having that hope that I was able to look at those images again, because I could see that they weren't just horror, but in portraying that horror was also hope. It was hope of, shifting things on the micro level, on the individual, the minds, who with the eyes that would see it and feed the mind that information, but also on the macro level, in towns and cities and countries, how this would be a real positive thing to help people see through the deception of the abortion industry. And certainly that was the challenge that you mentioned, the slave trade abolitionists being one area, and there's so many others that are great examples for us, where you just cannot hide the horror of an evil, of an injustice, of an atrocity, and expect people to be sympathetic with the victims. It's just
why do you think that you get such visceral negative reactions to displaying these images, when the most human response is simply to mourn the tragedy of what you're seeing? And yet when you expose the horrors of abortion, what you actually get is vitriol and spite and anger. And why do you think that is the reaction, rather than beating your chest, wrenching your garments in two, and covering your head with ashes?
Yeah, well, I think you get both. I think that the worst one to try and deal with is that kind of ambivalence, and glad to talk about that later. But I think the reason is people want to live in denial. They want to live in a fantasy world where the facts don't matter. And the way that abortion has got to the stage where we're at now is by maintaining the fiction that it's about choice, that the baby isn't really a baby, and abortion isn't really an act of violence that kills that baby, that tortures that baby to death. So certainly the anger tends to come from those who have something to protect, because you're kind of exposing an idol to some degree, which is bizarre, because all we're doing, and we're very careful about the way our displays look, the optics of it, as much as possible, and 95% of our visual displays out on the streets, all we do is have an image, perhaps, of a living baby in the womb, maybe a 7-week embryo, and then a picture, a jarring picture next to that of a baby, same age, 8 weeks, who's been aborted. All these ages are from fertilization. Now, if you support abortion, if abortion is something you want to champion, you believe is a human right, well, then why is it when you see abortion you're not celebrating? Because we don't have any kind of real editorializing of the images, or embellishing with slogans. We just have the picture. We have perhaps life above the living baby, and choice above the aborted baby, and the age, and there'll be a size reference in the image. We deliberately steer away from slogans like abortion is murder, or anything like that, because we want people to look at the images and come to the conclusions that they should come to without us kind of feeding that information. So when somebody who is vehemently supportive of abortion comes across one of these street displays, in theory, they should, cheer and stand with us and say, yes, that's the thing that I support. That is a woman's right. And should be signing up but there's
because the images are just neutral, aren't they?
They're like neutral.
They're open to interpretation. It could, for all anyone knows, you could be a pro-abortion movement,
yes,
showing the joys of abortion.
Yeah. And we've had that several times. People come up to us, say, are you for this or against it? Because it's unclear from the text what our position is, and we've had people think that we are in support of it. There's so many of these interesting conversations that occur. But I think Greg Cunningham, who set up CBR, he summarized it quite well when he said that we don't protest abortion. We're not protesters. We do not protest abortion. We show abortion. And when people see abortion protests itself. That it condemns itself. We don't need to. What do we think we can do with our words that could, convince somebody even further of the reality of that? Now, I'm not discounting that there are sort of necessary, apologetics and conversations you can bring people on to help them. So they suddenly had this sort of rug ripped from underneath them of, abortion is just getting rid of a few cells. If there is a God, I'm going to be all right because I'm a good person, because I've never killed anyone. But they've suddenly realized that they've believed a lie, that if they've been involved in abortion in some way, that blood has been shed. So it's very important that what accompanies those images is compassion. It's a willingness to allow people to vent, because they will vent their anger. Do you mind me going off on these stories, Bob?
Well, I mean, no, it's fine. I do. I'll jump in, as we agreed before we started the live stream. I'll just jump in. I can see you like one of these boulders. You just nudge it forward, and then it just starts to roll on its own momentum, which is fine, which is great for a live stream. But I'll jump in as and when I want. You mentioned about this idol that's being exposed, and very much for me, I think the church needs to get to grips with the reality of the idol of the self. Now, I'm speaking as a religious studies student, and academically, we actually talk about the religion of the self. Like it's a proper academic field of study. It is a field of study in the discipline of religious studies, which is this modern worship of self, where self is God. And this is cuts to the very heart of so much of the malaise and the destructive cancer that's so eviscerating, if that's a word, and it should be a word, the Western lifestyle. And like and I was wondering, your thoughts on the connection between abortion and the worship of the self, because it seems to me that there's a very strong connection. That we're sacrificing our children for our career, we're sacrificing our children for our wealth, we're sacrificing our children for our comfort, and it literally is an actual human sacrifice for a benefit. It's the very inversion of what Christian love is. And I just wondered what your thoughts are on that.
Well, I mean, I would say it's not like child sacrifice. I mean, it is child sacrifice,
Mm.
and because of that, it does mean that as Christians we have very clear kind of mandate to do something about it. You know, it's not just I suppose in a secular sense, we would say, well, this is a genocide. This abortion is genocide.
Yes, absolutely.
In the yes,
what numbers are we talking about there, Andy? Because genocide is obviously a big word.
it is.
I mean, big in the sense of it has a huge moral weight to throw that into a conversation. So, what kind of numbers are we talking about when it comes to abortion? How many children in the West are we killing?
Well, in England, the numbers in England and Wales should be sufficient enough. We're looking, 250,000 babies a year, every year on year. That those numbers growing. Worldwide, I mean, the last time I checked, it was, well, that was quite a few years ago. It was between, numbers would range from like 40 to 70 million globally. Yeah. I think, the genocide label is a contentious one, and as is the child sacrifice one, but doesn't mean we shouldn't discuss it in those terms. It's important that we allocate the right labels to things, and people will complain bitterly that you would you would label abortion as genocide, like it's there's a settled definition. That there's always been arguments about genocide was what happened in Armenia. Genocide was, so but I think there is a very compelling case to make of, well, who is the people group who are being targeted here? Well, it's unwanted babies, and we are killing them at such a
Industrial scales.
Yeah, and so effectively. So we've become quite proficient at that. People want to balk at the idea that abortion is genocide. Fine, people deny all kinds of genocides, but your argument isn't with me, it's with the numbers. And be glad to have that debate with anybody who wants to pick us up on it.
Yeah, but I do. Sorry, I'm going to jump in again. Like, why so many of the? I know you're not in a position to call out names, but I can, and so I'm going to. Why are so many churches, big churches, like Holy Trinity Brompton, St. Helens Bishopgate, like big churches? Why are so many churches, particularly within the Church of England, why do you think so many churches are shy about speaking out powerfully forward, from the pulpit about these issues? Because I noticed by their absence, the absence of these big churches at the last March for Life, and I'm just wondering, I've named them, not you, but I'm asking you the question, why do you think these churches and others like them are scared to talk about this topic from the front and clearly against?
Man, there's so many reasons, and I think typically it's fear of man. I'm going to go off on it's a related story. I was chatting with with a friend. She's the wife of one of the elders at the church I was at, and she noted we were talking about syncretism, and in particular with Japan, and she was watching this documentary, on this Japanese Christian who talked about balancing these different hearts, these different worldviews, whatever their family religion traditionally had been, and their Christianity, and trying to hold these things in balance. And to our eyes, from the UK, from the West, it seems so obvious. Well, look, you're just trying to mingle in this, was it Shinto, whatever it is, this these, and you see
belief.
African countries, ancestral worship, all this kind of thing, and then they'll have their Christian thing on a Sunday. It just sort of dawned on me, well, how are we not doing the same thing here?
Absolutely.
Our idol is how we're seen by society, being liked, being comfortable. So I think it's a combination of varying things. Nobody really wants to be disliked, and it's precisely the same problems what we're seeing with abortion and the reluctance to deal in a meaningful way with it is habitual. It's historical. We talked about the abolitionist fight against the transatlantic slave trade, and I don't know that it was the same kind of culture necessarily of fear of man so much back then, but they had the same opposition. There was a really interesting.
Just sorry to just before you finish that point, but I think you've hit the nail on the head in the sense of we have compromised with liberalism, like we have syncretized Christianity with liberalism in the same way that you can spot examples of syncretism in Africa or syncretism in China or India. And when we, with our Western eyes, go to Africa and we see syncretism with worship of ancestors and Christianity, we go, hey, that's syncretism, it's really obvious. But we're blinded to the syncretism that so permeates so much of the Western church, which is that we've syncretized Christianity with liberalism. And thus we're open to this idea of individual choice trumping biblical, apostolic and prophetic values. Yeah,
absolutely. Liberalism and comfort, we just don't want to be bothered. As long as we can watch, I don't know, whatever, Big Brother, whatever it is on television, and we can still go to church on Sundays, do our thing. As long as I'm not made uncomfortable, then I'm fine. And dealing with abortion will make you uncomfortable. It'll make you unpopular. And it's a slightly different issue, possibly, that the abolitionists were faced with 250 odd years ago, when they found real reluctance from many churches to do anything about it. And in particular the Church of England, who there was a Society for the Propagation of the Gospel into Foreign Parts, that wing of the Church of England,
Mission Society.
Yeah, you think, great, that they want to go out there and get the gospel out there. They want to see soul saved, but they were funded by the profits from their plantation in the West Indies, the Codrington plantation, which had, I think it was something like a 40% mortality rate. And when the Bishop of Chester challenged them on this at their annual meeting, just to make kind of changes, ameliorative changes, just to improve the conditions, there was a refusal to do it. So you had the gospel being furthered on the blood of human beings, and we think they will pay the price so we can get our version of the gospel out there, and we are sacrificing babies because we think we've got this other message that's more positive, that doesn't deal with the dark things, doesn't deal with real life, and so we'll forget the babies so we can go and spread this, God loves you.
So it's a gospel-centric distortion of the Christian worldview, isn't it?
It
it's
is. Because God loves, Jesus loves you, and that's it.
No, exactly. And this is, this is a problem with churches that only live out their church life 7 hours in a week. You've only got 7 hours in a week to do anything with it. So you've got to be really selective about what you do with those 7 hours. And so obviously the gospel therefore rises to the top. But the result of that is it then distorts your entire Christian worldview. And we need to correct that by actually creating a church life that is 24/7. Where you don't have to make those rationalizations to how you use your church time.
But it does spill over as well, Bob, as well. When we first started this work in Brighton, the churches in Brighton had made a pact together that the only response that they would give to abortion would be a pastoral one, and even that was quite pitiful. It was essentially a kind of a pro-choice. Well, you do what you feel is best. Listen to your head, listen to your heart. No kind of directive, no real gospel or life-affirming help going on there. But anyway, when we would go outside the clinic in Brighton, and we would stand there with our banners, showing people who were on their way into the clinic what was going on. Essentially, we were removing the walls from the clinic and showing people what was going on inside, kind of an X-ray into that building. And we got approached by the churches in Brighton who asked us to stop doing what we were doing. They acknowledged that we were saving babies. They could see that people were changing their minds about abortion. We even, the police were involved, the local council were involved, the churches were working meetings to what can we do about these troublemakers. So one of the church leaders wrote to me and said, I recognize that your presence there will save some babies, but ultimately you're going to damage the work we're trying to do in Brighton, and appealed to us to stop going outside the clinic. So I just asked them, have you ever written to the clinic to ask them to stop killing the babies? And of course, that was kind of the end of the
conversation. Did you get a reply to that question?
We did. It was kind of dodging around it.
So he did reply, but he didn't answer the question.
Well, pretty much. We even had a church in Kent that was right opposite an abortion clinic. Man, there's so many of these who we strongly believe they called the police on us. That the police came out to shut us down. We had there's another church leader who was very close to one of these clinics near London, who we went to. We said, we want to go and start showing people the reality of what's going on in this place. We want to shift the debate as it is from it's a woman's right to choose to what it is she's choosing. Let's show people, we want to show people what choice looks like. and this guy, he said, man, it breaks my heart. It's his office, but was office window was on the same street as this clinic. He says, I see these girls going in and out of this place, going in with their babies, coming out without them. and it breaks my heart. And he said, well, will you join us? You know, pray for us, come out, pray with us, or whatever. He said, well, we're going for change of use for our building, because we want to be a mega church, and we don't want to rock the boat with the council by doing something like that, because it's going to essentially spoil our chances. Our priorities are so off.
It's weakness, Andy. It is syncretism with liberalism, which is the very heart of the problem. And you know, we have to keep calling it out until everybody wakens up to the fact that we have syncretized Christianity with liberalism. But out of that, yeah, and I would also say it's the cowardice of comfortable people.
Yeah,
you know, a lot of church leaders are very middle class people living very nice middle class lives, and to suddenly get involved in confrontation would involve uncomfortable things. It would involve conflict. It would involve sacrifice. It would involve actually, you know, being considered as not being the good guy or the nice guy. And for me, this is at the very heart of these two things are at the very heart of what we're describing. Now, obviously, CBR UK has this grand strategy of you know, this live stream was organised over nearly a year ago at your launch event for your big national strategy. So how about you tell us something about your national strategy, and the two questions to that are, the first one is, how does it involve changing the church's mind, if at all, if there's any element to that national strategy that is involved in changing the church's attitude, and two, how is it aimed at changing the public's mind? So if you tell us about the national strategy of CBR UK.
Thanks, Bob. Yeah, so essentially what we need to do is change what we've been doing for the last, you know, since 1967, which is applying these principles of social reform. So it can't, our fight against abortion can't be for the purpose of making ourselves feel better about the problem. It's got to be to make society think differently about the unborn child and about abortion. So for many years, we've been putting in place the kind of infrastructure for training and equipping people to carry out these displays in cities across. I think we've got 13 or 14 teams now across England, Scotland, and Wales, and growing numbers. And actually, we could have had more teams, but we've concentrated on trying to build the strength of those teams and getting them to go out to other areas. So the first stage, I think, of this is it's got to be lifting the veil, opening the casket on what abortion is. I should start this off really that we're doing what we're doing because we think this is a winnable battle. This is something that we can change. And I think if there was kind of more careful thought put into this, less kind of protection of brands and organizations, more diligence to
more courage,
and to just do what needs to be done, I honestly think we could see this thing end within 5 years.
That's a bold statement considering the size of the industry.
Yeah, and that is, I think, you know, I've been doing this for, as I say, almost 20 years, and I'm becoming increasingly convinced that that's the case, because what you can see is that abortion just causes utter devastation to society, but society's made up of individuals who, you know, we've got millions and millions of people in this country who've been involved in abortion, who have been fallen, huge numbers of them just fallen for the deception. So they're below the surface, totally in polar opposite to what you would hear from the Westminster bubble, or the guard that we live in a majority pro-choice society. It's an utter lie. We're out all across the country, and what we find on these displays is that people are horrified by this, that this is going on, that there are MPs like the Labour Party, members of the Labour Party, Stella Creasy, Donna Johnson, other MPs who want to see this liberalised even further. You wouldn't think it could get any worse.
No, I mean, and I do want to. It is getting worse, obviously, because now they're pushing for killing people at the other end of the spectrum, on a euthanasia. But I just want you to zoom in on your national strategy. I know what your strategic aim is, to take the lid off it, to expose it. I know what your hope is, that it could be ended in 5 years. But tell me the strategy by which we end up seeing it. What's the strategy to take the lid off it? What is the strategy to end it in 5 years? Yeah.
So it's certainly a growth of the exposure that needs to increase, of who the baby is and what abortion does. But it's connecting up that kind of street level, real life, real thinking about what abortion is and what it does to the policy makers. It's a grassroots. I think it's got to be driven by grassroots movements. It's got to. Our strategy is to create or see networks created that kind of help realize this these changes of minds, and people can see some of these change minds videos on our YouTube channel and on our website, where you see people saying if they had essentially if they had the choice to vote in support of abortion or vote against it, that they would vote in support of it until they saw what abortion was. So we've got to change public opinion first, and that is changing, and then it's linking up, it's emboldening MPs or peers who would then see the reality that they've been duped by the extremist abortion lobby who haunt the corridors of power, feeding them junk information, ideologically driven, with actually what their constituents think and feel and how they would vote if given the choice on this. So that's kind of a snapshot of it. And
so are you wanting people to join teams? Are you setting up teams? And if so, how can people get in touch with you to do that?
Yeah, so if they go to our website, that's one way. Join them.
What is your website?
It's CBRUK.org. That stands for Centre for Bioethical Reform, UK.org. And they can join the movement there. But it's not just about, this isn't, look, we don't want, we're not seeking to grow our organization. We don't want people getting in touch thinking, oh yeah, I love CBR UK's work or whatever. I mean, that's great. If the end goal is just helping us, I don't want us to exist in 5 years' time. And so maybe that will be, we certainly need more people who are out on the streets showing this stuff. But we need other help as well. If people have admin skills or tech skills, all these other things, doctors, lawyers, because we've got to think a lot bigger than the work we're doing. Maybe they'll get in touch with us and we think, well, that's fantastic, but you'd be better suited working maybe with this group or connecting with these people. We've got to think a much bigger picture than just increasing our kind of CBR UK footprint out. However much we do need that, but it's realizing there's much more to this than we can handle as an organization. It's realizing our role, our part in this bigger picture of seeing abortion end. And our role is showing people the reality of abortion and demonstrating that there are enough people who can change their minds about this issue to make a meaningful difference. But we also need other groups, other individuals to be playing their part in this bigger picture with this goal of going for the complete abolition of abortion. And I absolutely think that's something that we could see. And sorry, just one last. If people want to see that, if they want to see that happen on that micro scale, I'm pretty sure it's on the homepage of our website. But there's a Change Minds video on there. We've got hours and hours of this kind of footage out on displays of people saying, I supported abortion until I saw it. And we see that all over the country. It's totally disconnected to the way that MPs are behaving and voting. And so I think that's seeing our role as an organisation in this.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I really appreciate about the pro-life movement as a whole, because it's an alliance of organisations, isn't it? But one of the things that I really appreciate about the pro-life movement is that it is an example of where the church has actually got its act together, where the church is imaginative, creative, forceful, energetic, zealous, and it's really making an impact. And if the church could only apply this same kind of tenacity to the persecuted church or a number of other issues that are blighting the church and society, it would be incredibly useful. I'm often, like, of all the political parties, there's only the Christian People's Alliance, which is an avowedly pro-life party. And so I'm wondering if you've heard of the Christian People's Alliance, if you know of their existence, whether you would vote for them, because a lot of there is no other party that's actually 100% we want to bring an end to abortion. All the other parties, Reform, the Labour Party, horrendous. Even the Conservative Party, they're all kind of like, yeah, we're okay with abortion, and then just some of them maybe say, well, we want a maybe slightly more restricted form of abortion. Whereas the CPA is the only party that says, no, we want to abolish abortion completely. So have you heard about the Christian People's Alliance? Would you vote for them if you saw them on a ballot box?
I can't remember whether we've had a candidate locally, but I seem to remember we have, and pretty sure I voted for them. Last elections we had the option of voting for Vote Life candidates. And
was that Christian's party?
That was, yeah, I mean, he didn't have a chance to actually set up a formal party because it was such a rush job, but it was an amazing thing to see happen in such a short space of time, that 22 people came forward to stand as candidates purely to further this cause, to push the narrative into center stage. And again, this is one of the things that makes me hopeful, that having this this kind of short-term goal, we've got there's this election coming up, here's something practical you can do. Spend your vote on voting for this candidate who is going to say that the unborn child is somebody we should be protecting, not seeking to kill.
Well, all CPA candidates do that. I do think that Christian was very clever in gaming electoral law to allow him to put this issue right in people's faces, you know, and that was quite imaginative. I was wondering in terms of the sorry. You mentioned about the devastation that abortion causes, and obviously one of the realities is that to our global elites, we're all just a GDP statistic. And if you abort millions of children year upon year upon year upon year, well, that's millions of people that are not born in your nation. And there is clearly a connection between immigration and abortion, in the sense of, if you kill swathes of your own population, well, you still need population to replace them. And so it creates a positive pressure for mass immigration. And a lot of conservative voices who are against immigration, you know, or against mass immigration, at least, because you know, there's actually nothing wrong with immigration, but against mass, and particularly mass uncontrolled immigration, haven't joined the dots up between that issue and the abortion issue, and how one feeds into the other.
Absolutely. And then we're having a, which is possibly in part why euthanasia is being pushed. We certainly won't have the workforce to help sustain an aging population. So that's the trouble. You know, you come up with what looks like an answer to a problem, and all it's doing is I mean, you're burying that problem to fester and creating a whole load of other related issues, and we're in a mess, certainly. And you know, I think in a way that's precisely where, this is my opinion, others may not share it. I think it's the desire of the likes of the Labour Party to bring about that kind of deconstruction of society, because huge swathes of the Labour Party are you know, committed Fabian members, and it just looks to my mind that they haven't shifted from the values of their founders, you know, like the George Bernard Shaws, or the Webbs, or you know, whoever else it was who had these deeply disturbing worldviews. I think most liberals would be horrified about, but these are the foundations of the Labour Party. There's a really interesting, very short video that people can watch. It's just over a minute long of George Bernard Shaw talking about how he saw the need for some kind of panel for people to come to every few years to justify their existence. And if they couldn't justify their existence, well, he didn't hate them, but he wanted to kill them because they're essentially these kind of useless eaters. And you know, the Fabians try and make they kind of lament this past. They have to acknowledge it on their website, but say, yeah, that was bad. Well, but how are you really doing anything different? You know, with your support for killing unborn babies, for this killing people at the other end of life, you just seem obsessed with death.
That's what, you know, St. John Paul II called it a culture of death. and you would often hear him sermonize and rage against the culture of death and saying how we need to establish a culture of life. And I think you touched on it, that euthanasia, which is now being pushed by the Labour Party and by others as well. It's not just the Labour Party. The Conservatives are just as bad. The Liberal Democrats, even members of Reform are not, even sitting members in Parliament of Reform are not exactly against, not all of them are against euthanasia either. And it is, I do find that it's not coincidental, I think, that this push for euthanasia comes as we basically realise that there's no way to solve the pension crisis, because we've killed all our children, and so the whole pyramid is now inverted, and so we've got this massive pension crisis. We've got this huge pushback against the liberal global elites who wanted to just solve everything through moving people around the world, and now they know that that agenda looks like it might come to an end. They're wanting to push euthanasia, because we've got bed blockers, because those children in the those elderly patients in the NHS don't have families to look after them, because we don't have the young people to pay for the pensions of the elders, and so all of a sudden, they won't admit it, but there's an economic rationale behind a euthanasia. And I wondered what your thoughts are with regards to the recent vote to pass the euthanasia laws, which is going through Parliament at the moment. What you thought of the debate, what you think how the law might pad out in the future, the effects of the law, and just generally on this bill that's going through Parliament at the moment.
I think it was inevitable. Probably even going back to the 60s, that this would be coming, or going back further than that. If you look at the history of where a lot of this comes from, I think it's despicable. And the likes of Esther Ranson or whoever else who are promoting this, I just think it's shameful. Because when you look at what was it, the Netherlands, I think last year there was a story about, I think now they're trying to reduce it to make it available for children, between 1 and 12 years old. And in Belgium, I think that's been happening for a while. And a stat I heard a year ago, and I should have checked it out before this, I think it was something like half of euthanasia cases, and please go and don't take my word for this, half of the euthanasia cases in that particular year were non-consensual. So it's people kind of scoff at the, you grew up with this. We've got so many examples of this kind of thing that, it's even so quickly. What was it on just yesterday or the day before, where what's the MP, Leadbetter, where she's, this was being pushed through originally with one narrative. It's always the hard stories, the heartbreaking stories that we should have compassion about, but their answer to it is obviously despicable. But now it's even shifted from that to removing it to needing a high court judge to ruling it to being a panel, effectively 3 experts, which still sounds rather
clinical
to me.
Bit Stalinist.
That's Shaw and these others, that these founders of Fabian say they were taken in by Stalin's display of how things could be, and their little trip to Russia. But it's I think it's inevitable.
It'll inevitably be ended up being offered to people who are depressed,
Yeah.
People who are maybe suicidal, and people who
Expectation.
and people who just have a life condition rather than a terminal condition.
Yeah, and feeling obliged because no resources are now being put into palliative care, or hospices are being underfunded, shut down. What other choice am I going to have? I'm going to be a burden on my family. I wouldn't choose to normally to make this decision, but I can see how my existence is going to just be an extra burden in this economic crisis. How do I justify my existence? Well, Mr. Bernard Shaw certainly has an answer for you, and the Fabians are more than happy to put that into practice.
And so I think then, I think part of the reason for this is, and it's again, it's the continued de-Christianization of the West. Yeah. The West is post-Christian now anyway. Whatever remains of its Christian cultural resource is nothing but echo. But it's because we've moved away from the imago Dei, the imago Dei, the image of God as a doctrine that undergirds a value, because all your values emerge from your doctrines. Whatever your doctrines are, your values will emerge from those doctrines. And sometimes there can be a period of time when your doctrines and your values don't align because your doctrines have changed, but you haven't yet clicked on the fact that your values don't line up to your doctrines. And so what's happening with the shift from the 1970s when they legalized abortion and now when they're trying to legalize euthanasia is that they've realized that our values about life don't match up. Not our, but the liberals have realized that society's values about life don't match up with liberal doctrines of man. And now they're trying to align the Christian echo, the Christian values. They're trying to get rid of those and replace them with values that better represent the liberal value of the doctrine of man. And as Christians, we need to be, again, bold and forthright and clear and able to articulate the imago Dei, the image of God, as the doctrine. The thing is, we can't, there's no non-Christian way to fight against this, because because anything other than the image of God can't sustain a narrative of the dignity of life and the value and importance of life.
Sure. Yeah, no, it's an interesting point, and I mean, I think that anybody can reason, and we, on our displays, we have atheists who hold up the signs because they recognize that that the unborn child should be protected. But what we do find in doing so, in using these images, using truth, unveiling the deeds of darkness, really does bring on those conversations about what it is that gives us value. Because, I would say before doing this work, I tried all kinds of street evangelism, or the door-to-door and the traditional, more well accepted means of reaching people. And I'm not saying they were completely fruitless. I hated them, to be honest, not the people, the activity. But one of the kind of unexpected consequences of confronting injustice and shining light on truth is that it opens up such an amazing opportunity to share the gospel with people who weren't interested about it before. And so on our displays, you know, it's appropriate, and there's a need, there's almost a demand that we have this not service, but we give out you know, John's Gospels and share the gospel with people, because it inevitably comes to, well, it's not just it's wrong to kill human beings, but why is it wrong to kill human beings? And so it just leads inevitably to these kinds of conversations. And I'm not trying to denigrate those other forms of evangelism by any means, but there's kind of a shortcut that this takes in getting behind the facade that people tend to put up, and the natural kind of blockages, that obstructions to dealing with the big questions, you know, of why we're here.
And I think that's a correction to the sort of the gospel-centric distortion that many churches fall into the trap of, which is this thought that if we go out about any other issue, then therefore we're not talking about the gospel. Yeah. And actually, and that's actually at the heart of my evangelism. I rarely do I start a conversation with anyone who's seeking to learn the truth. Rarely do I ever start about talking about the gospel. I talk about the issue that they want to talk about.
Yeah.
Or I talk about an issue that's about something else to do with the Christian worldview that I know is of interest in culture or politics. And that often engages the person, by which you can then take the conversation to other places.
Yeah.
Or if you win a number of these, let's call them pastoral points, or discipleship points, if you win a number of these discipleship conversational points where the person goes, oh yeah, you've got a point there. Oh yeah, actually, I've never thought about it that way. And then you sort of offer them the opportunity to learn more about Jesus and discover who Jesus is. Very often they discover the crucifixion and resurrection all on their own. And often, in my experience, I win a couple of these discipleship conversations. And then the person comes back to me a couple of months later or a couple of weeks later and says, I've become a Christian. And they've accepted the crucifixion and resurrection without even ever having talked to me about it. Just read it in the gospel and gone, yeah, I believe this now. You know, thanks be to the Holy Spirit.
Yeah, and I think we can be, there's kind of we replace that. Churches can lean towards replacing those means by substituting it for something quite superficial. And as you say, well, we don't want to deal with this issue because that will put people off the gospel. But actually, you know, we could probably halve, or, you know, cut down to an eighth a church's activities, you know, with the goals that they have in mind that those activities would achieve, by being prepared to be a witness against evil. And I think some of it is because there's this expectation. Well, if you're going out on the street showing these signs, or if you're going out to, you know, engage with Muslims or whatever, there's this, oh, well, you're just being argumentative. You're going around putting your thumbs in people's eyes. But actually, no, we don't need to do that when the truth has power to convince in it. We can almost take kind of a back seat in our involvement, as long as the truth is getting out there. So we don't have to spend, you know, hundreds of pounds on coffees and donuts or lights or smoke machines to attract people in who actually probably shouldn't even be in church anyway. But we can get out there, convince people of their need for a savior, by helping them be convicted, obviously not because you're telling them that, but because they're seeing it, and they are convicted by the truth. But we try and steer around that, perhaps. And there are some fantastic, doing this work, we've met some amazing churches, some amazing church leaders who are more committed to obedience, who are more committed to being faithful than they are to appealing to the culture. And that is, I mean, it's
is there any you want to spotlight for people, so that if people want to go to those churches and they can?
Yeah, well, I guess it depends where they are, and Dave Brennan would have a more accurate figure. But even thinking of Dave Brennan runs our Brephos ministry. He has a podcast called About Abortion. But I look at his home church. I was up there a couple of weeks ago, and it's just it's a humble building. It's they're more concerned about, it seems to me, what they are building than they're building. So much of the time, it's about the outward appearance. There's the Tron Church in Glasgow who've been just fantastic in their boldness, and yeah, lots of other churches. I forget the name, but the pastor.
Feel free.
Yeah,
feel free to name drop them and where they are if people want to go and support those churches.
But in your own church as well. I mean, this would be an important message to people. Now, obviously, pastors are being bombarded all the times with suggestions and ways they could do things better. But I think there is an approach we can take with them to appeal to them. Find out what is the thing that they exist for. Why are they here? Why do they have a church? Why are they a church leader? And if it is to see Jesus glorified, to see the gospel go out, to help them see that engaging with dealing with injustice isn't the thing that gives the church a black eye. The thing that gives a church a black eye, a sullied reputation with the public, is saying that these things are important, but doing nothing about it.
Exactly.
So lovingly approach them, send them to Brephos. Yeah.
No, yeah. I mean, we can't obviously talk about this issue. We are A, talking about the March for Life, and B, talking about the banning on prayer outside of abortion clinics. And obviously this is an incredible and terrifying, in all the wrong ways, legal precedent and legal norm that we've now established, where people are being policed for their thinking inside the United Kingdom.
Yeah,
we literally now have police who some of them are just brainwashed pen pushers that have come out of university, who are just looking for they're librarians high on power and not much brains. But I'm sure there's also lots of decent coppers out there who thought they never thought when they joined the police force that they'd end up acting for the Stasi. And so, like, this is an horrific situation that we found ourselves in. And I just wondered, what is CBR UK doing to push back on that, and how you see the danger of that expanding. This idea that we're being policed now for our private in-head thoughts.
Yeah, it's so bizarre, isn't it? I mean, if you suggested even 5 years ago that we'd be, well, maybe 10 years ago, we'd be having to discuss this, you would have thought we'd just be talking about some kind of dystopian novel or something. But I think that it's characteristic of the other side, of their anti-life, anti-Christian agenda about trying to replace all that with this idol of self. But again, there's nothing new about it. In the States, there was a rebellion. I think it was a slave called Nat Turner. There was this uprising, and the result of this was that it was ruled in. I won't try and guess which state it was in. Maybe it was Virginia or area. But anyway, it was ruled that it would be a crime by punishment by up to 2 years in prison to suggest that a slave had no right to own. A master had no right to his slave. So this, I think, because the other side are incapable of defending their position. They're incapable of providing a convincing case of what they stand for is good. So all they're left to do is put a moratorium on any kind of opposition. Any countervailing perspective has to be removed, because they know their position is just indefensible, which is the important thing of not backing down when those opportunities arises, because it indicates that there is something deeply, fatally flawed in their position, and you want to draw those people out to defend their indefensible position, get them defending why prayer ought to be banned, why abortion can't be seen. And
I think I mean, you've said it very well, that the elites are losing the argument, and so this increasing clampdown on what you can say and on expression, and now on even Christian acts of worship, and saying that there are certain places in this country that a Christian cannot pray, is a reaction to the fact that, in terms of the debate, our opposition have lost.
Yeah,
they can't argue it, they can't defend it, they can't celebrate it, they can't rejoice in it, they can't put out these images plainly and say these are good things. They know that they've lost the argument, and so their recourse now is to force. It's to the brutishness of their militants in state police to suppress opposition, because they've lost the debate.
Yeah, and this is why it's so important that if people don't want to become despondent or in despair, that people really study the history of social reform, and in particular the abolition of the transatlantic slave trade, and later on the abolition of slavery, because none of these tactics are new. I am comparing, I'm here openly declaring that the pro-abortion lobby are the moral equivalent of the West India interest, the pro-slavery lobby. And we need to learn from how that injustice survived, how it thrived, and how ultimately it was defeated. And we're talking right up essentially to the last minute, that there was defeat after defeat. You had acts of parliament being used to defend the slave trade, the slave owners. You had judges who would rule in favor. So you had parliament, the judicial system, you had the press, all dominating the narrative that slavery was good for the country, that the Africans were made for this, that it was a necessary evil at worst, but we needed it. And if we can learn anything, it should obviously the word of God, but books like, I'll hold a couple up. You go there. Here's a great one, Bury the Chains, and that's about the abolitionist movement, and another fantastic one, the Interest by Michael Taylor, and it just looks at how the establishment, the British establishment, defended and manipulated systems to sustain such an evil injustice. I don't think many people are aware. We think, oh, slavery, that was bad. It was demonically evil. It was
absolutely.
But what their fight was is so similar. The abolitionists, Wilberforce, Clarkson, Buxton, is so similar to the issues we're facing, and we shouldn't be put off that the other side is fighting tooth and nail to preserve injustice. We need to learn from them. We can look at how they mischaracterize the abolitionists. So you had these uprisings over in the West Indies, and it would be the abolitionists who got blamed because they were suggesting that the slave could be free. So it was down to them. It was the missionaries over there viciously and violently attacked by slave owners because they were putting all these thoughts of freedom into the slave's head. It's a spiritual battle, but it's a winnable one. And in these books, the history of social reform is what informs me that this is indeed something that could be won in a very short space of time, because the fuel is there, the fuel of trauma, the people who have been harmed by abortion. I think when it comes about, when it's realized how deceived people have been, and ultimately this is about them seeing spiritually who's behind it. It's not just, we can look at it, oh, it's Labour, or it's Alice Bailey's agenda, or whoever else, but ultimately, yes, we need people to see the names and the faces, who is being used on this world, but ultimately I think it helps people see that there really is an evil, there really is one who hates our souls, and there is one who hates us, and
I mean, I think a lot of amateur demonologists speculate that it's the demon Moloch, that's behind this obsession with killing kids. But I think in terms of, I think part of the problem, coming back to this issue of the church being captured by the cowardice of comfortable people. Yeah. A lot of it boils down to the fact that a lot of Christians have forgotten that that we used to be a Christian society, a Christian civilization, that until the emergence of liberalism, that a lot of Christians have forgotten that actually, when you look back over the histories of countless civilizations, countless peoples, the Christians weren't considered the heroes. They weren't considered the respectable people. Our Lord was not considered a respectable person. The apostles were not considered respectable people when they called out idols and refused to worship other gods. The Christians that did evangelization into, many of the pagan civilizations weren't considered the heroes. They were considered the villains. And actually, in a sinful liberal society that has set its face against God, we Christians shouldn't be all that respectable. We should be the ones, poking at the idols and trying to topple the idols and trying to expose the idols. And that should inflame the passions of the cultists. And I think so much, and this is why I like CBR UK, this is why I keep platforming you guys, is because I like the fact that you're willing to be the villain.
Mm.
You know, even though in the sight of God, obviously you're the hero, but in the sight of society, you're willing to be the villain.
Mm.
You know, you're willing to be those extremist Christians. You're willing to be those offensive people that, you know, that upset.
Mm.
And I believe recently there was an issue, wasn't there, with CBR UK outside of a major Christian convention. I forget what was the convention. What was it? Sorry, what was it?
Keswick.
The Keswick convention, the Keswick conference, and that's a big Christian gathering. And what happened there with respectable churchmen and you know the committed Christian? What happened in that situation?
Yeah, well, we've been outside Keswick twice. The ironic thing is, we've only shown in Keswick, I think this is right, but I think we've only shown pictures of living babies, you know, beautiful, made in the image of God. We should, you know, look at this and be in wonder. But we were unable to, as is often the case, get anything inside the convention. And so it seemed to us that, you know, you've got thousands and thousands of Christians converging into one place. What a great opportunity to give them something useful to do other than, you know, perhaps going to another conference. The organizers, like these churches in Brighton, appealed to us to not do it, that it would damage the reputation of the convention. And it was very similar actually to the response of the organizers of another festival here in Sussex, Big Church Day Out, who I think at the time were getting in like 20,000 Christians to attend the conference.
In what way do they think that being pro-life could damage the reputation of a Christian convention or a Christian conference or a Christian gathering? How what's their logic to saying that being pro-life damages that reputation? Who are they trying to appeal to?
Yeah. Well, I mean, with the Big Church Day Out, it was very much, well, this is a family event, and we'd written to them saying, look, could we just have a table inside? This is a great opportunity to reach people. We don't need to use the graphic images, but you know, the images of the living baby in the womb, and people can see this stuff if they go to erf.science. Actually, while I remember it, everybody listening now, there's an amazing, if people want a really helpful tool, and you've got a smartphone, there's an app you can download called, I think it's See Baby Grow, and it's by ERF, and it just shows this amazing video footage of a living baby in the womb. Anyway, so these are the kind of resources we wanted to take and use and expose Christians to, but apparently that was not consistent with the atmosphere that they wanted to create of a family atmosphere. Well, we would say these unborn children are part of family, you know, spiritually, and that they're being, you know, ejected from families as well, naturally, physically speaking. But who knows? I think it's because it's a real fear. A lot of this stuff, it's about getting people in. It's feel good.
Yeah.
And
it's about,
I think when our Sunday mornings are so often be focused on that, we really need another big event that kind of puts that on steroids.
well, more to the point, it just shows a complete lack of vision. What it says to me is that a lot of these people, like the people that are always organising, is it the Keswick?
Yeah.
Keswick.
Yeah.
the Keswick Convention and the big church day out, is that they don't actually have a Christian vision for civilization. Because if they did have a Christian vision for civilization, they would want to expose the people that are coming to it to as many different expressions of what a Christian civilization would look like.
Right.
But it also shows that their understanding of the Christian life, of church life, is all gooey, and it's not about, it doesn't involve anything controversial. It's so insipid and soy and goop. And you're none of those things. CBR UK is none of those things. You're very much fighting the good fight. And have either of these conventions or these groups apologized to CBR UK? Have they reached out to you to invite you to come in and maybe host a table next year? Has there been any kind of reconciliation based upon?
Yeah, not these ones. I mean, in the end, we just ended up taking the banners outside the big church day out. We thought these people are going to see abortion, or they're going to, we could have shown them just the living images, but we took the living and the aborted images outside. We thought we need people to see this. No. Other conferences have. I can't think of them now. I've never been a big conference person. Have been more open to having a table in there. But I think it's just that. I mean, I don't know what the content of the rest of their conventions are. I'm sure a lot of it's very good, but I think this is the problem. I mean, there are a lot of important issues, but we can, if you look around and survey the allocation of resources and people to important issues, I think they're fairly well staffed. But inevitably, I think every age, every generation has an issue that is so toxic because it is so evil. And those who perpetrate it have so maligned and mischaracterized anybody who would stand in opposition to it that it just doesn't get touched.
It can't be stressed enough that abortion and now euthanasia are literally, in the most literal sense of the word, killing the West. Literally. Like I can't underscore, embolden, italicize those words enough. You can't save the West if you kill all the kids. It's just like, stop talking about saving the West if you are in any way pro-abortion. It's like, but let me ask you about the March for Life. Has the dates been picked for this year's March for Life? Do you know when it's going to be?
I don't know.
Not yet. Fair enough.
No,
what was your thoughts on last year's March for Life?
I've never actually been. No, I did. I went in 2000. I don't know. Maybe it wasn't a March for Life. It was a march when I first got involved in this that went from Parliament Square to Westminster Cathedral. But I've not been to any of the March for Life events, and I mean there's some great people there, and I think it's growing, and it's purely just because of other things I have on, and having to kind of restrict weekend activities typically when you've got a family, but we have people who attend, and I think Dave's done some training up there. Or but I don't know too.
That's fair enough. I mean, a man who dedicates his entire life to fighting this battle is allowed a day off, and if that day off just happens to be when the March for Life is, I wouldn't.
I think it's. it's one of those things that.
Do you think it's important that Christians go on the March for Life? Do you think it's important that there is a March for Life?
Yeah, I think it's important for there to be a visual demonstration of numbers. But again, it depends on why something exists. Is it fulfilling its purpose? I would say that I think the organisers probably it's about having this, togetherness on it, rather than it being something that's necessarily a witness to the culture about the evil of abortion. And so for that reason, it probably does. September 6th.
Yeah, so one of the admins, for them that are just listening that are not seeing the screen, has identified that the March for Life 2025 is on September the 6th. So get that in your diaries, guys, and get your asses down to London to join the March for Life on September the 6th, 2025. Got no excuse.
Yeah, definitely. I mean,
that includes you, Andy.
Yes, I'll make it this year. I think, if we could also use that opportunity to educate society, because I think typically they'll those events will draw some opposition, as they tend to do.
I mean, I've attended it for the last 3 years. Every year it's gotten bigger. Every year there's more people.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Yeah, I've gone every year because I mean this is an issue that I'm concerned about because I have other things that I'm involved in as well. I can't maybe give as much energy to the pro-life issue as you can, but so I do things like this to try and support where I can. But I've every year I've gone, it's always been bigger, and every year the opposition has got bigger as well. And last year, disturbingly, we saw an example of two-tier policing in the pro-life march. Yeah,
not in the UK.
Two-tier policing in the UK. Who would have thought it was a thing? But basically, what happened was, whenever a Christian approached the feminazis, who were screaming their lungs out for killing of kids, the police would quickly usher said Christian away, which is fine. Okay, you want to keep the two groups separate, but they allowed the feminazis to stand in front of the pro-life stage, the pro-life march stage, and to cause as much disruption to the pro-life event as possible. And the police didn't intervene at all, despite numerous complaints. And it was kind of like it just shows how policing can be one-sided. Have you encountered problems with the police and sort of two-tier policing in any of your displays and demonstrations with how they deal with counter-protesters?
Wow, yeah. There's a well, it started, I mean, Catherine Sloan, now Atwood, and I were arrested multiple times early on doing this work, and we would then and this was just for showing the reality of abortion. No shouting, no obstructing anything, just for showing the reality of abortion. So the police were some of the police were quite enthusiastic to do their job in those situations, and we've made amends with those that constabulary, and generally have quite a good relationship with most police forces we work with, and we very much respect them. But occasionally you do get some rogue officers who kind of overstretch their authority. And I mean, I don't know how far up that goes, whether they're acting on their own kind of feelings or whether it's from some kind of diktat. But yeah, there's been
have you experienced situations where counter-protesters have
Yeah.
been violent and the
Yeah.
police have done nothing? They've been
Yeah.
present, they've seen a crime, but they've done nothing about it.
We've had volunteers assaulted. We've had equipment vandalized, physically assaulted and verbally abused. There was one officer, after one of our volunteers was punched in the stomach, who said, "Well, if you're gonna do this work, then it's gonna be expected." And there was no appetite, zero appetite to uphold their oath of kind of impartial policing. It was, if maybe somebody steals some equipment or vandalizes something, there just isn't the same kind of action as if we'd been thinking the wrong thing
outside of an abortion clinic.
Yeah. So
in other words, physical. So in other words, what physical assault and criminal physical assault and criminal damage have resulted in less response by police who've observed the crime than someone standing silently and thinking thoughts to God outside of an abortion clinic. Do you think for 1 second if any of your volunteers had punched one of the counter protesters or vandalized any of their equipment, do you think the police would have been so passive had the action been in the reverse?
No.
What gives you that feeling? Why do you have that feeling?
The police are
Sorry, I'm not trying to trap you here, but I am trying to draw out a point.
The police have been quite vigilant when it comes to our movements, and we actually invite them to our displays because we want them to see how we conduct ourselves. So every display, we will send a notification out to the police and asking them to come along and attend, or even if it's just popping in for a bit, they can do it undercover so they can make sure we're not just behaving for them. But yeah, there's a real reluctance to, and the danger of it is that I don't think they realize is that they, in this kind of two-tier policing, when they ignore criminal damage or physical assault, what they are saying is that that the law, even common law, is kind of arbitrary. There's in this town, you might be all right if you go and punch somebody in the face,
so long as you've got the right politics. That isn't a, and wonder, we see it with shoplifting now. Police, there's a reluctance and difficulty. I understand it in dealing with shoplifters, but shoplifting is just rampant now. If you don't deal with a student who takes a knife to a banner or a blade, and you just give them a slap on the wrist saying, well, we don't want to, they've still got their whole life ahead of them. Well, what's that? What are going to be their parameters for what they can do and get away with in life if we turn a blind eye to this sort of behavior? It creates an atmosphere in which the next assault becomes okay. It has become common knowledge that you can just walk into a shop and walk out with whatever you want. Nobody's going to do anything. And now that's become common knowledge. It is an absolute bane and curse upon poor shop holders and small businesses up and down the country. But there's been a long pattern of the police turning a blind eye to left-wing political violence, which many of your volunteers have suffered from. But what that does is it just means that once that becomes common knowledge that I can punch, kick, spit, use a knife, vandalize, steal, once it becomes common knowledge that this is going to be accepted and tolerated by the police,
Yeah.
More of it will be seen.
Yeah.
And so I just want to put out a call to any Christians who do security work, door work, bodyguarding work, that have got their licenses and their badges. One of the ways that you could help CBR UK is come and volunteer to provide security to CBR UK teams. I know there's one Christian that did do some of that for you guys. I don't know if yeah, exactly. And so if the state is not going to protect Christians, Christians need to learn to protect Christians.
Well, yeah, and it says something about the police when we can't look to them for maintaining public order and preventing breach of the peace. Their answer to it would be, it seems, well, you shut down those pesky pro-lifers. Well, that's not how it works. You don't limit freedoms when that freedom is it's just being attacked by mobs, who have an inclination towards violence. You deal with the mobs, and for us to hire very, very good bodyguards to do the security work says that we have quite little faith in the ability or the willingness of the police sometimes to do their job.
And this is why I'm encouraging Christians who are fully licensed security men to volunteer their time. You can give to CBR UK with your time. It doesn't necessarily have to be with your money. And if you're a security guard in the security business, or you're a Christian security company, link up with CBR UK and see how you can assist, to help Christians with this concern. Just as we close, as we sort of bring this to an end, obviously Trump is now president of the USA, the most overtly pro-life, not necessarily perfectly pro-life, but the most overtly pro-life administration in generations. Who by packing the court with pro-life judges helped to overturn Roe v. Wade, attended the pro-life march in Washington, and whose cabinet is full of pro-life Christians. What do you think about the Trump effect on the pro-life cause, and how do you see that rippling out into the UK?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question, because I mean we see it amongst we do see some panic here amongst those who champion abortion, but it's kind of sad in a way as well that I think one thing I'm slightly cautious of in kind of steering our vehicle, well away from the abyss of kind of liberalism and complacency over these kind of issues, that we don't steer too hard and start putting our sort of trust in kings and men. So I was, 2016, go off on a whole big other topic here. I was really enthusiastic about Trump, and there's certainly, in terms of the pro-life stuff, it would have been a disaster for the unborn child had Democrats got in, and I'm grateful for that. The balancing now of the Supreme Court and the likes, but I'm handling all of that with caution as I watch Christians possibly get kind of caught up in what seems to be an answer to this awful atrocity, that we don't get drawn into something quite dangerous in terms of this the Christian nationalism kind of thing, that we keep a level head, and we see our role in society as being able to see change, to create change, and not look to our leaders necessarily to be the ones to instigate that. Well, for all kinds of reasons, a whole other podcast, I guess. But yeah, I mean, it's certainly encouraging that the other side have been put on the back foot, and I think anything that causes the pro-abortion lobby to shudder over here, put them on the defensive, is great.
Yeah, and I mean, I note and observe the dangers of confusing nationalism with Christianity. Nationalism can also become nationality can also become an idol. And it is also a fruit of liberalism. It's just another expression of liberalism, and another form of syncretism, when we confuse our identity with Christ, which should supplant any other identity, with some kind of view of, say, American identity, in which Christianity is hard baked into that understanding of Americanism. And that's a misunderstanding of what Scripture teaches on the question of identity. But nonetheless, people like Trump are needed as part of this battle, and he's given us our biggest victory in recent years, easily the biggest victory, and has definitely created a positive energy on this issue, at least, if not perfectly. Right, brother, I'm going to close in a psalm as a prayer, and then we'll end the live stream. If you want to hang in the backstage after the psalm, and then we'll talk afterwards.
Brilliant.
All right. So I'll just pray this. The Lord is my light and my saviour. Whom shall I fear? The Lord is the defender of my life. Whom shall I dread? When the wicked drew near against me to eat up my flesh, those who afflict me and are my enemies, they weakened and fell. Though an army should array itself against me, my heart shall not be afraid. Though war should rise up against me, in this I shall hope. One thing I ask from the Lord, this I will seek, that I may dwell in the house of the Lord all the days of my life, and behold the delights of the Lord, and visit his temple. For he hid me in his tabernacle in the day of my troubles. He sheltered me in the secret place of his tabernacle. He set me high upon a rock. And now, behold, he has lifted up my head above my enemies. I went around and offered in his tabernacle a sacrifice of joy. I will sing to the Lord and praise him with the harp. O Lord, hear my voice, wherein I cry. Have mercy on me and hear me. My heart speaks to you. My face seeks you. Your face, O Lord, I will seek. Do not turn away your face from me. Do not turn away your servant in wrath. Be my helper. Do not utterly cast me away, nor forsake me, O God, my Saviour. For my father and my mother forsook me, but the Lord laid hold of me. Instruct me, O Lord, in the way of your law. Set me on a straight path because of my enemies. Do not deliver me the souls of those who afflict me. For unjust witnesses rise up against me, and and injustice lies to itself. I believe I shall see the Lord's goodness in the land of the living. Wait on the Lord. Be courageous and strengthen your heart and wait on the Lord.
Mm.
This is the word of the Lord.
Mm.
Thanks be to God.
Tutti